All right, so we'll call to order. Mr. Burke, I know if you wouldn't mind moving up to the front table here, it would just make everybody feel more. Yeah. I ask specific questions of administration during these meetings. I just want to make sure everybody's. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to policy. Attendance will be as noted. Dr. Russell, correct?
Correct.
All righty. And with that, we are going to move on to Section 2, review cycle. There are none this month. Section 3 is PNNs. Dr. Russell.
I'm sorry, Ms. White. I am hesitating because Dr. Parr and Mr. Ganesh did prepare a slide deck to share with the committee very briefly some background on AI as
Okay,
that comes
no
up
worries.
in the policy.
Not a super
And I
rush.
just
I just
wanna-
wanted to get us moving.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in and get them ready. Go. Thank you, Dr. Parr and Mr. Ganesh. I appreciate it. So I'll take care of attendance. So review policies. So there are no policies as part of the review cycle this month. So if it's okay, Ms. White, we can jump into the most recent PNN from PSBA. And coincidentally, there were a couple of policies that we've been discussing recently, a part of the most recent PNN. It came out just this month. And there are a couple of terminology suggestions. I'll pull up the drafts, and I appreciate the feedback about vaping and maintaining some of the language that's very specific for our students and our community in some of these policies, despite what PSBA has recommended. So we'll start with policy 222, which is tobacco and vaping. And essentially what you see here is Ms. Widener has uploaded in the draft section both our policy with the proposed revisions as well as PSBA's policy volume 2 2024 is how that's labeled. So what administration is recommending is really to bring over a portion of what PSBA is recommending while maintaining some of that language, for example, under authority, that specifies not only or sale of tobacco and vaping products. So PSBA, for whatever reason, had eliminated and vaping. They eliminated vaping products as a reference. However, we know that this is something at the forefront of our thinking and challenges that we're addressing. So I would agree with the recommendation. It's important to keep that language in the policy and be very explicit about it. So that's the recommendation of administration along with some of the other recommended changes per PSBA. Any questions?
Is there any additional discussion on that?
Okay, so we'll send that to first reading. Back to the agenda, we'll jump to 227, similar. Again, very briefly, two policies, Perkiomen Valley's policy and then PSBA's policy. This policy is entitled Controlled Substances / Paraphernalia, again, one that we were discussing. So there are some terminology changes, some additional statements that are incorporated by PSBA, recommended by them. Administration supports that and has incorporated what they've suggested. So the changes appear in green.
Is there any comment or conversation on that?
Okay, great, thank you. That'll move to first reading. And then we're going to move to policy 323, tobacco and vaping products. And you might wonder, well, we just did that with 222. The 300s reference staff, personnel. They're all related to personnel and the adults that are employed. So we'll take a quick look at that. It's very similar. So you'll see, again, some of what was recommended by PSBA in their version has been incorporated, and we maintained the and vaping, the specificity of the vaping, because again, it's at the forefront of some of the things that we're dealing with. Very similar in terms of its language.
Dr. Weston?
Yeah, do you want to make the definitions consistent between 323 and 222? Because it looks like they're not entirely consistent. If you look at number 2, for example, your revisions to 220 to 222 includes a vaping pen or device as an addition, but I don't think I see that under 323.
Dr. Weston, is that the number 2 under the term tobacco product in 323?
Definitions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Up top. Okay.
Under 323, the first paragraph, second bullet under that paragraph. It doesn't look like it's consistent with this with the same thing under 222.
Okay. So a vaping pen or device.
A vaping pen or device.
Mhm.
I mean, is that
That makes
up to-
sense.
yeah.
That makes sense to administration if the committee agrees. I'm not sure why it would be inconsistent. So are there any questions from the committee on that? A vaping pen or device after delivery systems. Okay, 323. Yes.
I guess I just want to, I have one question, quick question, just to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly for staff. Under authority, board prohibits use of tobacco and vaping products by district employees in the school building, obviously on school buses, vehicles owned, leased, or controlled by the school district, or on property owned, leased, or controlled by the school district. So if an employee were in their own car on campus, they are not to be vaping or using tobacco.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
Mhm. So we're going to add this after delivery systems. Okay. Any other questions on this one? Ms. Widener will clean that up for us. Okay. Okay. Okay to send it to first reading?
Okay.
Great. Okay, so we'll go to controlled substances, that's 351. So again, PSBA is updating the terminology and the language in the policy to be more explicit by referring to drugs instead as controlled substances, and then you'll see some of the other revisions proposed in green that administration agrees with and seems to make sense. Any questions on this one?
I'm sorry if we have to go back. Did I miss things? Maybe I'm just not reading quick enough. Is there something that, and I know it says absorbed, is there something where somebody can be medically prescribed a patch? like if they're doing tobacco cessation?
Yes, I think there is a comment about that. So, yeah, that's is that 323? Okay.
Oh, I see, a patch, gum, or lozenge, smoke used
Who has a
or
written
as a
order.
smoking cessation product. Okay, thank you. Just
Sure.
wanna make sure.
So we're back at 351, controlled substances. Any questions on this policy? Changes here.
I think we're good on that one too.
Okay, send it to first reading. And then
707 is use of school facilities.
So this policy had a few more revisions that were suggested by the PSBA version. However, in speaking with Mr. Weaver and in his review of it, he didn't take into consideration, he didn't input all of the changes that were suggested by PSBA. And I think in our opinion, some of those changes are more like an admin reg. And that's already documented on our website and as part of the procedures. What do we do when we rent a portion of a facility or a facility?
Yeah, that's correct, Dr. Russell. We have a very beefy AR 707 that we utilize to identify a lot of those areas. And it's out in the public. So we feel like all of those other options that the PNN had that we've already identified and expounded upon in the AR.
Thank you. Any questions on this one? Okay.
Robust, yeah.
Robust, right.
We'll make sure the minutes reflect it. Yeah, in quotation marks. Okay.
Okay. Thanks again, Mr. Weaver. Okay, so before we move on, to 815.1, I was sharing with Dr. Weston that there were some really good questions about AI and where we are as a district. How are we defining it? What are the tools that we're looking at? And Dr. Parr and Mr. Ganesh are here this evening. They've put together just a brief slide deck to give everybody some background knowledge. And some of this has been shared with our staff. Some of the slides are exactly the slides that our staff have reviewed as we are educating our staff and our students. So we'd like to start with this before we then move into a conversation about 815.1. Ms. White, are you okay with that?
Please.
Great, thank you. That is an excellent question.
The quiz at the end, I guess, will be whether or not it's generated, right?
I was going to mention that in the slide number 2, that some of the content was generated by AI and we just had to make some minor corrections. Let me start off with that slide then. All right, thank you, Dr. Russell. So as you guys know, the 815.1 is a new artificial intelligence policy by PSBA. But over a year now, we've been evaluating and piloting various AI programs and softwares, developing guidelines and etc. So our goal is to wrap up that work this summer and bring to the next policy committee the new school year with, thank you. Sure. Bring to the next policy committee the new school year a tailor-made AI policy and admin regulations for PVSD. So that is our plan. So again, before we begin, what is artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is just a technology where the computers are able to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capabilities. So basically, there are two types of artificial intelligence. One is the traditional way, which is basically they follow a defined set of rules and perform tasks, where the newer version, the generative AI, is basically, it follows, it is capable of reading large amounts of data, identifying patterns and structures, and hence able to create new content. So again, the traditional AI will just do the task for you. That with Gen AI is able to create tasks for you, create content for you. That's a big difference between those two types of AI technologies. The common examples would be like, the traditional AI would play a chess, would be the Siri or the Alexa that you use on a daily basis. Those are defined by set of rules. Those will be a traditional AI, where if you use a program like ChatGPT or something like that, which is able to respond to on a prompt, hey, draft a presentation like this one, or provide an outline to a presentation like this one, or create an email, those kind of things where it's able to generate content based on the data that's already out there. That's a Gen AI. That's a generative AI. Generative AI is basically a technology where it's able to create text, music, images, various type of content based on the prompt by a human. That's a generative AI, and it's kind of catching fire of late a lot. It's a great technology that's really getting absorbed into many fields. All right, so we already know what Gen AI does. It not only creates these content, but it's also able to simulate complex events, predict outcomes, and it's also produce high quality content that humans are not able to produce. It goes even beyond just creating basic content, but it's even able to identify certain patterns that humans might miss because it's able to analyze such large quantities of data and identify patterns and structures. Again, this slide might be a little nerdy, but I'm going to go through this very quickly. So this is how basically the AI works, right? It's very similar to training a toddler on how to identify an object. Like, you show a picture of a dog and say this is the dog. The next time you show a picture and ask what it is, eventually the toddler is capable of identifying all the dogs, right? Similar concept. You feed a large amount of data through those computers. Those computers are able to identify the structures and patterns, and now they're then able to create new content. So that's basically how the Gen AI works. It's basically neural networks and machine learning. There are two types of networks in that. One is a generator network, which basically generates all the content. Other one is a discriminator network, which just evaluates that content and say if it's correct or not. For example, if you might say generate a picture of a dog, this generator network will generate a picture of a cat and come and show to the discriminator network. The discriminator will say, nope, go back and try again. So that's how the checks and balances happens within a generative AI. There's two different networks that work closely with each other to kind of identify the patterns and bring the content that's required. I mean, you might have seen this, the growth of AI is just everywhere, right? So back in 2022, the market cap of just the AI piece was about $10 billion. And now the prediction or the projection is it's projected to grow at over 27% a year and reach a market cap of about 130 billion by 2032. So this technology is growing very, very fast. And this is also one of the skill sets that's currently very sought after in the modern workspace. So this is something that's here to stay. This is a skill set that's really sought after in the modern workspace as well. Again, there are so many uses for this AI, right? When we talked about we kind of on a daily basis use some of those text generation and the image generations, but the real game changer comes into the healthcare fields. It's an asset to the healthcare field. The ability to do the drug discovery by able to identify new compounds and able to create new therapeutic methods is really a game changer in the healthcare field. Again, because its ability to identify large amounts of data, is able to process all those images, x-rays and whatnot, and able to identify, like for example, cancer diagnosis, right? It's very easy for these things to go through the various images and identify things that might have been, when left undiagnosed, might cause into a big issue. So this is able to identify some of those items much earlier. So it's kind of a very critical tool in the healthcare industry. Again, you might see a lot of gaming a lot of AI in the gaming industry as well. It creates such an immersive, engaging environment for the gaming industry, and it creates so many characters. It's humanly not possible to create all these things without any tool like AI. So again, there's so many uses, but these are some of the things that are being widely used on. And I'll pass it over to Dr. Parr.
Okay, as Mr. Ganesh was saying, AI has really infiltrated many, many areas. It's also very prominent in the arts, art, music, literature. Just out of curiosity, there was a song last year in the summer that really took the world by storm. The #1 song on YouTube, it was called Heart on My Sleeve. Did any of you hear it or know about it? Me neither, but it was by Drake and The Weeknd, which I hope you guys have heard of. However, the odd part about this song is that neither of those artists contributed, nor did they know anything about it. It was completely AI generated using their their different voices, their styles, the whole bit, and it was put out on YouTube as if it was by them, and it was, I think it ended up in litigation, of course, but that's just one example of how AI is really taking over all different areas, for good and for concerns. Saw this, whoops.
Oops, sorry.
Uh-oh. I saw this, this little saying, which is, how many of you have used any kind of AI tools? Okay, today is the worst version of AI that you will ever use. And what that means is it's going to continue to grow, it's going to continue to explode, and it's going to continue to evolve. What does that mean in education? Well, bottom line is, the only bad way to react to AI is for us to ignore it and pretend that it's not going to change anything. We really need to think about how this can impact our kids, how it will impact education, and how we want to move forward for our students. If you have not played with AI at all yet, I would suggest that you go ahead and explore the one that everyone is talking about, which is ChatGPT. There are many, many other tools, but this is the most popular one at the moment. It came out in November of 2022. It is the fastest growing application of all time. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, I put 3 different icons at the bottom there. And I'm just curious, first of all, do you know what that first icon is, the little pink one?
Facebook?
Instagram. Come on, Mr. Ganesh. That's Instagram. Just a guess. How long do you think it took for Instagram to reach 1 million users? It's just going to put some things in perspective. 1 million users. Shout it out. Anybody else? 2 months. Took 2 years. 2 years for Instagram to reach 1 million users. How about the next little icon? Anybody?
Ghostbusters?
It was Ghostbusters, but they renamed it. It's now Snapchat.
Oh.
Anybody, how long it took for Snapchat to reach 1 million users? He's sticking with that. 1 month, 2 months, 1 year. ChatGPT came out in November of 2022. Fastest growing application of all time. How long did it take that to reach 1 million users? 1 month, 2 months? Anybody else? Yeah, 5 days. 5 days. And that was back in November of 2022. We are a year and a half later, and it's way, way more than 1 million users. So again, these are the tools that our students are using, or at least starting to use, and they're starting to hear about. So how do we as educators embrace this and start to think about how we use these as learning tools, these tools? Right now in PV, we have dipped our toe in the water, so to speak, and we are piloting several tools mainly for staff use. Some of those tools include School AI, Magic School, and Flint. Magic School, that's a little tough to see, but these are some of the tools that Magic School provides to teachers. There is things for writing recommendations. There is text leveling, so that you could take a piece of text, you could pop it in there, and you can say, can you take this and rewrite it for someone of a certain reading level? There are rubric creators, rubric generators, all kinds of things. Magic School was free. It now comes with a cost. We thought about maybe purchasing something for our teachers. However, just today we found out that Khan Amigo, which is Khan Academy. How many of you have heard of Khan Academy? Khan Academy just released Khan Migo tools, free for teachers, free for life. Karthik loves the free for life. So we are going to explore that. And I thought this was very timely, especially in giving you the message that this continues to evolve almost faster than we can keep up with it, AI in general. So we're going to be looking at Khan Migo tools and sharing that out with our teachers. There are also tools that have AI built in. So it's almost, it's something that we need to think about, because we really cannot, quote unquote, block our students from using AI, as it's going to be built into some of the tools that they use every day. For example, right now, Canva is a tool for a creativity tool, and AI, there's something called Magic Studio that's part of Canva. Canva is available to students. the AI piece is not available to students yet. So again, just giving you some ideas. So for example, if someone like Mr. Ganesh wanted to go in and say, create me a presentation on AI for school board members, this is one of the tools that would create the entire presentation for you.
I didn't go to Canva though.
He didn't go to Canva, went to something more sophisticated, I believe. Also, there are tools for AI specific to educators. ChatGPT is for everyone, for the entire community. But there are tools specific to educators. Stretch AI, which is by ASCD and ISTE, which are two education associations. There's Conmigo, which I mentioned. Google has Gemini, which has an education piece, and Microsoft has Copilot. And again, these are just to name a few. AI in education, advantages and concerns. On the board minutes, you saw that the PNN that was created is influenced by Teach AI. Teach AI provides an entire toolkit and a framework for schools moving forward. One of the things is the advantages and the concerns. I don't want to call them disadvantages, just the concerns. One of the biggest things that our teachers ask about, I could call on Mr. Clellan here and see what's the biggest thing teachers are worried about. Academic integrity, exactly. So that's one of the biggest concerns. When we talk about AI in education and learning tools for students, that is the first thing that is brought up. However, there is so much more to think about in both the advantage area and the concerns area. And this is what 815.1 will help us to do, really think about these items and create our frameworks. Just as an aside, Pennsylvania up till about, I want to say maybe a month ago, was not going to touch AI because it is evolving so quickly. But the demand from all the constituents and all of the school districts, et cetera, has really put some pressure on Pennsylvania to get out some guidelines, and that's where this 815.1 was born. So one final thought. I know that we went through it very quickly, but one final thought. The most powerful use case is if AI can be used to enhance HI, human intelligence. So there's a lot of concern about AI completely surpassing humans, but really we want to try to change the narrative. How can we enhance what we do as humans using AI? And that's it. It's a little weird to present while staying seated. I guess that's a policy committee thing, huh? And policy committee's very serious. Any questions? And I am sure we completely overloaded you, so I would certainly welcome questions after this meeting as well.
Is there any conversation or further concern specific to 815?
I would.
Okay, just hit that.
I actually had a situation like yesterday where a student used AI for an assignment, and there was a lot of confusion because, I mean, it's clear that they used it, but at the same time, it's a tool. So I just think the types of language and the consistency with how we communicate with students from like all the way through is important as to where and how we can use it and where and how we should not. And maybe that's just the common language that we need to consider for specifically for writing and for providing work of their own.
So I think that higher education has already started to really spearhead administering education around how to use AI in a way that's much different than public schools. That's as I understand it. So I guess my expectation as a parent would be that the education of how to use it as a tool respectfully and responsibly should be embedded within the curriculum of every single subject, particularly at the secondary level, because what's going to happen is kids are going to graduate, they're going to go away to college, and they're not going to have the knowledge of how to actually use this to help them move through their studies, their degrees, because it is part of day-to-day life within all levels of higher education. So I don't know, how familiar everybody is. Dr. Weston, I saw some of your questions around the tool, And I think depending on what avenue you find yourself in, you would have more or less reason to explore. So I don't know if you've had any use about, the chance to use it and see actually how it can be harnessed, or think about how you would apply it. But I can tell you that kids are using it every day, and to the point that they should know how to cite it. So I don't know if that's something that's being taught in the English classes at the high school, how to cite sources when AI is the source, when ChatGPT is a source. There is actually a proper way to do that. So that would be my expectation, would be that the education of the use of AI would be embedded into the curriculum.
Mr. Burke, are you able to kind of go a little deeper in what you meant by student-used AI?
So the specific circumstance was a student was taking an assessment, and the assessment was, I think, on Google Classroom. They were supposed to be doing it in class, and essentially the student went to AI and typed in the question, got the response, cut and pasted. The teacher was able to kind of track that and identify the fact that the student got it from another source. It was found that it came from AI, and then the conversation just becomes, how do we correctly use it as a tool, and not when I'm being asked to put my name on the top of an assessment that evaluates what I know and I'm able to do.
What subject was that?
I believe it was an English class.
Okay. So that, to me, I don't believe AI technologies like that belong in a classroom or students have access to. Education is about teaching a student and then assessing whether they comprehend what they've been taught. And if you then log into any type of device that gives you the answers, you can cite the sources up to wazoo, unless you're writing like some type of report. That's not your work. That's not your comprehension. So it's important, if we want to actually be a school that produces and generates rigorous education, that we don't allow students to use technologies that just give them answers, that gives them nothing. I mean, I've been in the workforce for 24 years, and I've never used AI technology to code a program or write a program or respond to a client or put together an RFP. And from an educational standpoint, during an assessment, using any type of AI technology is just cheating. It's no different than looking at his assignment and copying and pasting what he has.
So I think that's definitely been a concern of ours, that students will use these tools and abuse them. However, they could copy from a journal and submit that as a paper. But instead, they're actually supposed to analyze for content, synthesize from a variety of sources, and put it together in their own words. So there are other ways that students can get information and submit it as a final answer. I think what we as an educational institution currently are attempting to do is to introduce these tools in ways that help students to realize you still need to critically think, because teachers get to know their students and recognize their writing. And you can't just submit something, just like you can't copy from a manuscript or a journal article and turn that in as a paper. So we're teaching our students, or attempting to teach our students, how to use these appropriately, ethically, and with integrity as students, as learners. And it's not easy. So our teachers have been asking for policy language. I think some of the language in this policy is extremely helpful and gets us started. However, I don't know that some of the actions that result from using these resources are very different from some actions of the past that were possible.
Is ChatGPT allowed in this? Like, can a student access ChatGPT?
So ChatGPT, I mean, not through a PVSD account, but students can sign up. Students 13 and older can sign up for ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is not blocked in the network.
Okay. So what's preventing them? Like, I just use ChatGPT to do a math equation. What would it be preventing them from cheating? Copying and pasting the equation into ChatGPT to get the answer.
Well, they can't have their phones out at their desks.
They have their computer.
And I mean, to that point.
That's what I just asked. Can I get ChatGPT? The answer was yes. So what's going to prevent them from putting in the equation and getting the answer? Science class equation or a question, mathematical equation. algebraic equation, you literally just copy and paste it right in the chat GBT and get the answer.
So it's not just, before I answer that question, one of the things I want to mention is it's not just ChatGPT. Most of the educational programs that we use today, they have an AI component to it. So even if you block ChatGPT,
Word has one, yeah.
even if you block ChatGPT, right, there's whatever AI program that they use, whatever curriculum resource that they use, there is an AI component to it, which would become impossible to block all these.
Yeah, but those components don't necessarily give students answers to questions.
They are, because ChatGPT is open source, so these programs have a licensed version of ChatGPT on their website.
So they shouldn't be allowed in the classroom. There should be a way to turn.
Google, you can Google any item though.
I'm just gonna, okay.
Well, Mr. Saylor, do you want to have a conversation about the use of it in the classroom, or? Oh, you don't want to have a conversation communally? Okay, that's fine. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Mr. Ganesh, you go right ahead.
So as I was saying, so ChatGPT is an open source program, right? You can have a licensed version of that and integrate that into your own. You can bring in the GPT into your own programs. So it is all the programs most of the programs that we subscribe to, like Dr. Parr was saying, like Canva, for example, have a AI component to them. So it'll from a technical infrastructural point of view, it is going to become very challenging to block all these programs because they don't follow a specific protocol. It is embedded in their program. Does that make sense? So going back to, if I may answer one more, going back to some testing protocols, right? So for PSSA and stuff like that, we do provide Chromebooks that are not capable of going out to the internet, so they can just go only to the testing site. So if we go down this direction and we want to kind of restrict devices during testing periods, so we already do that in elementary levels. We already do that to a subsection of our students. During the testings, these devices have no ability to go out to the internet, no ability to search or anything like that. All it is, it's a full screen that comes on, and that's all they are having to deal with. They cannot go outside of those programs.
Do you have something to add, Dr. Russell?
The only thing I was going to respond to Mr. Saylor's point that yes, when he asked about plugging in equations and getting the answers, students can do that. The tools that they have access to are capable of generating that kind of information. So how do we stop that is the question. It's with parameters. Students can't have phones, or they can't use a Chromebook, or teachers need to administer a paper pencil test depending upon the information that they are actually assessing. So it is about the parameters also that our teachers establish that would prevent students from accessing information and answers in that way.
Dr. Weston?
Just as far as it goes with applications that'll like, give you the answers, I have an app on my phone that will solve pretty much any algebraic or calculus equation up through what I would generally expect kids to learn in first year calculus. It'll give me a differential, it'll integrate an equation for me. So those tools are out there, and they've existed for a long time. I don't know if teachers are seeing issues that would make them think that the kids are actually using things like that. So I don't know how much of a problem things like that are. It seems to me that there's it kind of gets to a philosophy of education and how we work with students. Is the goal for the student to turn in something at a particular time to satisfy the assignment, or are students buying into the idea that they're actually supposed to be learning something and partnering with the teachers in that education? I mean, you could I've played with ChatGPT once or twice, and you get some interesting feedback from it. I suppose that if Mr. Cleland, if you gave me an assignment to write a 1,000-word essay on Holden Caulfield, it would probably be able to do that. But, you know, that doesn't help me any in learning how to write a literary analysis. Certainly isn't something you would want to read. I'm sure you've read a million essays about Holden Caulfield over the course of your teaching career. I don't know. It just there's a way of thinking about this that I think we need to get to.
I think it's also about, if I could just interject a little, how we design instruction and how we design our assessment criteria as well. I might change that assignment to, instead of write an essay about Holden Caulfield, I might say, tell me how Holden Caulfield may have influenced something that you went through in your life, so that it's a little bit more personal. And I think, to piggyback on Dr. Russell, there are definitely times when it would fit and times when it wouldn't. Times when we would change our guardrails and times when we maybe wouldn't. I do think, however, that it's a huge mistake, in my opinion, as the tech person, so I should have this opinion, that we ignore it or block it altogether. I think we need to teach kids the right ways to use it and maybe give them some different ideas where it would help them in their learning.
Even if we block it in the classroom, they're still going to be able to use it at home.
Right, and to Karthik's point, it's going to be almost impossible to block because it just keeps evolving and popping up everywhere.
I did notice in the policy that it says the teachers are going to set up parameters for individual classrooms for how AI can be used in the classroom. I mean, yeah, it's going to take a lot. All the advances we made to make feedback faster for students are kind of being undone right here, because now if we can't use computers, if we have to use paper and pencil in order to determine what a student is able to do and what a student knows, then, you know, now we can't have a computer grade that. That's got to be graded by hand. For redesigning the curriculum, I mean, even if the essay prompt now is explain how Holden Caulfield affects my life, you can still put into ChatGPT, write an essay about how Holden Caulfield influenced my life in regards to my dog, and it will still generate that essay, and it's tough to tell. So I mean, we almost have to go back to paper and pencil in certain situations, and it's gonna take everybody a while to figure out what we have to do to deal with this.
Well, before going to paper and pencil, there are some technical restrictions that we can put into place during testing periods or whatnot. If we decide to do so, we can allow only certain, like maybe the testing websites or only those particular apps to be able to be used in network. We can block everything else. So this way, like, you know, if needed, I mean, at this point, ChatGPT is open. At this point, all those tools are open. But if we decided, if our desire is to kind of lock it down during the testing periods, only during those testing periods, we are capable of allowing only set number of sites, like only those educational resources to go through, everything else be blocked, including Google. This way their students won't be able to go beyond their guardrails. Line-wise.
Class-wise, line-wise. Yeah.
Can you lock down individual rooms?
We could buy access points. We could buy whatever APs that they connect to.
No. So, for instance, you would have an IP address that students log into that at that time. So, you know, you're doing a book report now. We're gonna all do this book report in the classroom. First, you're gonna log into this Wi-Fi device. Once they're logged into that Wi-Fi device, then the test pops up that they can start typing into, and it doesn't allow any other sites unless they're pre-approved by the moderator, which would be the teacher in that to allow for that access point.
So, Mr. Saylor, what we are piloting right now is a management software. It's called LineWise is the parent company, and then ClassWise is the tool. And what it does is exactly what you're talking about. A teacher can see all of her students, all of their computer screens, know exactly where they are. However, they can also send to their class at that moment restrictions, like you can only open this website. You can't get to any other website. And they can see and they can pull reports if kids do happen to go to other websites. I mean, the only other thing I'll add is I know this is cheating like on a whole nother level, but cheating is not a new issue. I mean, we've done paper pencil in the past, and cheating is still something that we need to be concerned about. I do think there's a time and place, and I do think as we continue to look at this policy, this is just a first look, and it's it's just an idea from PNN. We don't have to adopt it exactly as written. So I would guess we wouldn't say like every teacher needs to create it. I think we would probably create a framework for each building, and then teachers can go from there. I mean, that's kind of how we would approach it, and with everybody's input. They would probably be more the ARs, like the admin regs, where we would outline more of that information.
Why isn't this already covered under the Code of Conduct and pertaining to plagiarism?
That's a great question. So I mentioned a little bit ago that some of Pennsylvania was a little reluctant to tackle this topic, and that's because they felt at the time that it was already covered with academic integrity as well as with 815. But I think it's such a huge animal that I guess they decided that maybe they do need some separate policies. Up until about 2 weeks ago, I was under the impression and of the belief that we didn't need a separate policy because it was already covered.
Right. I mean, that student for plagiarizing the assessment could have faced a one-day suspension. Is that correct?
I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, we currently are treating it as just that, as cheating. Like that's the way we're handling it. And I think right now what we're noticing is, like, for me, like in that situation, it's pretty black and white. It's either you did it yourself or you didn't. And if something else helped you or you received assistance from something, then it's cheating. And that's kind of currently how we're handling that.
Yeah, technological advances say, like Mrs. White said, they're citing it. At least to cite that something, I had to look it up, find it, read it, say this is what I want to copy and paste. Maybe I cite it, maybe I change a few words and oops, forget to cite it, but I've read this before. This isn't really your work.
Right.
But at least the student went through that effort. Or back in the old days where I would copy literally what he wrote for his book report, or my older sister had Mr. Burke for social studies, so she gave me all the things. I just copied and pasted it. Mr. Burke goes, sounds like this is like your sister's writing. The effort was there to write it out. Literally now just 3 words into an AI generative device, click print on a printer, and it's done, is a totally different concept. And there's no, at least with the other one, there's memory recognition because they're rewriting someone else's work. And so the process through rewriting it, they might be comprehending it or putting some of it to the memory. Now it is just literally a few clicks away, and my project is done on JD Salinger, and I've submitted it. And you could even through ChatGPT take what they have and then say reword like a
ninth grader.
like a ninth grader who wants a C on this test, and change all long words to make it so my teacher realizes that I wrote it, and it will literally do that. And it'll take a really nice report and dummy it down so they don't get caught. And you could regurgitate that 9 times so it keeps changing it so you're really there. And by the way, you could do all that in 7.5 minutes.
Right. So like was what Dr. Parr was mentioning, the class-wise, the tool for the teachers, that'll be kind of one of our great defenses against this, because the teacher now has, during a testing period, the teacher now has access to all the screens of the student, plus block any content that the student can access from that computer. That will be kind of an
So they become the moderator?
kind of in the classroom, yes. So they'll have a screen where they can see all the 20 computers the 20 screens that are in front of them, and they can put restrictions just as them, the teacher can put a restriction to those 20 computers saying you are not allowed to go anywhere else but just this, lock out, or even take control of that device, saying, your device is now locked out. So the teachers will have that capability with the tool that we are piloting, and our plan is to bring it to the board in a couple of months.
I mean, I think that would be extremely helpful, and I'm wondering, is that only when they're in the building that they would be able to lock those things down?
It's based on the rosters. It's based
Okay.
on who's sitting in front of them.
I mean, I think for us as administrators and teachers, the opportunity to really know exactly how we can harness that, but I think the bigger picture is really to figure out how are we going to teach our students to be responsible learners when they leave us, and how they're going to navigate college and actually use AI to their advantage, but do so with some, academic integrity. And I think that's something I'm interested in learning more about as we move forward.
Yeah, I think we're at a very exciting time in education. I think it's going to be transformative. And what we thought education was 100 years ago, totally different than 50 years ago, totally different than today. It's going to be totally different again. And in my opinion, we need to have much more conversation, more in-depth conversation about how we embrace this for our kids. And that might mean locking it down on certain days, and other days it may mean let's dive in. Let's take what you wrote, put it in ChatGPT, ask it to change the tone, and now compare the two. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that we can look at it. Mr. Saylor, I am just curious, and I don't want this to sound glib, I'm just curious. You mentioned you don't use any of those tools in your work. Why not?
Why don't I sell?
If you're stuck on a code, in other words,
Yeah.
would you use ChatGPT or one of the code?
Well, I don't code anymore.
Okay.
I coded from 2000 to 2011. We didn't have.
I was just curious if you
yeah.
were blocked from it or if you just haven't had a chance.
It didn't exist when I was when I was script writing.
Gotcha.
It didn't. I'm old. It didn't exist. Why don't I use it now? Because I find many of the pat responses that they come out aren't authentic in developing a partnership and a relationship as a salesperson to a client.
You're talking about like correspondence, like letters and those types of things. Okay, because I use it for like Excel and it's amazing. So I was going to say, like, for some of those types of things, it's really helpful. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I can second that. For example, when looking at large amounts of data or busing data, for example, throw it into this AI tool, it's going to kind of start giving you patterns and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be very difficult for a human eye to go through that and kind of identifying where are deficiencies, where this would come back and say, wait, look at this, these routes are running deficiently or whatnot. And again, I think we are focused, this is my 2 cents. We're focusing on one tool, ChatGPT, but there are so many AI tools. I know, for example, my son uses a tool that he uploads a PDF to that tool that gives out a flashcards for him. Like, it kind of summarizes those things. It's so much easier to read. Again, the positives of these tools are just immense, and I think students should be afforded the opportunity to use these tools, because when they go to the higher education, that's what the kids coming from other districts, that's what the tool that they're gonna be exposed to. So.
And higher ed has evolved also. It was, 2 years ago it was absolutely blocked, cannot touch ChatGPT, cannot touch others, and now that's changed as well to how would you cite it? When's the right time to use it? When's the right, when should you not use it?
Appreciate the group conversation. Is there anything else, Dr. Russell, on that?
There is not. Thank you for the opportunity to share some of that general information, and administration will continue to work with the language that's been presented and our experiences, and hope to continue the conversation.
Moving on to local policies for review. 202 is the eligibility of non-resident students, Dr. Russell.
I had a question for the committee. The current language in this policy states that permission may be granted for students who move out of the district to complete their school year without payment of tuition if the family has moved from the district prior to the start of the last quarter of the school year. And I wonder if that was actually the intent of the language, as opposed to after the start of the last quarter of the school year. So we get requests from time to time for students to remain in district. Parents are moving now, for example. And per this policy, I would like to recommend a change in the language so that if families are moving at the end of the school year, sometime in the last quarter, can they be granted permission, presuming they can transport, to finish out the school year here? That's the question. Current language is stated differently than that. Okay, so I wonder then if I can propose that and the revision and take it to a first reading.
So this particular circumstance, have we had an issue that it came up, or it just was in the review that,
It comes up, which is why it caught my attention.
okay.
It comes up, yes. And I'm not sure it makes as much sense to me prior to the start of the last quarter of the school year.
So I guess for me, the way that I would understand to read it would be, in thinking about what's reasonable, if a student completed half of the school year here, would it be reasonable for them to ask to finish the school year here? Like, the last quarter is very, like, if it's their senior year and they're moving out of the district,
Right.
and they've completed a half of a year here.
Then they are permitted, under different language in this policy, to do that if
Okay.
they are in good standing to graduate and have completed a junior year here.
Okay.
So where I struggle is with families who move very late in the year,
Yeah.
like April, May, June. Then they have to transfer their students. So their question to us is, can my children finish out the year? We will transport, and then we are gone for the start of the next year. They're not adding anything to our budget. They're maintaining what's already been established. And it can be a challenging time for a student to move in May of the year.
Don't they have a legal right to finish the year if they're here on the first day of the quarter?
First day of the last quarter.
Of the last quarter? So that, isn't that the determinative date as to their address for the school, for school purposes?
So I'm not sure if you're referring to the language.
Yeah, I sort of am. Like, it would be, it says that all other students, so there's special dispensation for somebody to complete their entire senior year. And then it says all other students may complete their senior year at PV if they ask if their parents move prior to the beginning of the fourth quarter. See, if they're there at the beginning of the fourth quarter, then they have a right to finish their year there anyway. They don't have to ask for anything.
You're saying that in order to accommodate, the language needs to stay the way that it is before.
The language, it reads like it gives the ability to give permission for them to
To make the
stay,
exception.
to make the exception, if their parents move prior to the beginning of the fourth quarter.
Because then it would be a given if it is already, the fourth quarter has already started.
Yeah, if they've established their address as of the beginning of the fourth quarter, they're allowed to finish the school year. There's no more reporting requirements or anything like that.
Okay, then that would take care of it.
Yeah,
Would, then there's no revision
a
necessary.
little complicated maybe,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. So we don't need to revise the language, and that
No.
makes good sense.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not there.
So for the next one, we were going to look at, just in greater detail, some of the language around bullying and cyberbullying. And the language that's represented in the policy aligns to what's in school code in terms of the definition. Where I think I wanted to come back with some information around this policy in the discussion was requesting that students sign off on an acknowledgement form that they understand the definition of bullying, and they will make every effort to avoid bullying their peers. Something like that acknowledgement form we talked about at the beginning of the year, certainly doable. We've done things like that in the past. So no recommended changes to the policy. And that would be it.
Are there any comments regarding 249. Okay, so then we're moving to closing items. Meeting minutes will be provided after the meeting. Proposed meeting dates are as follows. In 5.02, there is one error that I saw. That last May date is not accurate. I think it was just an oversight from this year, because that is today. And this is our last meeting for this school year. 5.03, notice of video disclaimer. 5.04, adjournment. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight.